The Last Guardian, developed by Sony Japan Studio, and Gen Design, a studio comprised of 4 members of Team Ico, probably has some of the most mesmerizing architecture and environments in video games. This should come as no surprise though, considering Team Ico's previous games also featured stunningly creative landscapes, such as Ico's intricate, weathered, and desolate castle surrounded by water, and Shadow of the Colossus' vast, isolated, and mysterious forbidden lands. The worlds that director Fumito Ueda and his team create feel distinct not only because of how secluded they feel, but because of all the detail and effort that was clearly put into their creation. According to Ueda himself in an interview by The Guardian, he stated that although we create very large structures, it's all down to the little details that make it seem as though they really exist. And the truth of this statement makes itself very apparent in The Last Guardian, whether that be how symbols and markings coat the walls, rubble from destroyed structures layer the floor, or how there are hints of different areas of architecture being built on top of one another. An example of this point would be inside the central tower. The outside and inside are coated completely in white with various blue markings, but despite this, on the inside there are some parts that don't adhere to this structural design, like this rusted old gate structure that is very similar to a lot of the other architecture seen elsewhere in the game, being seemingly built upon and overtaken by the white material, suggesting that the white material was used to build upon a pre-existing structure to serve a new purpose. It's little details like that really sell the credibility of the world. That stuff, combined with the otherworldly elements of the environment, like the fact that the civilization of the game exists in a crater of sorts, and the bizarre beasts of this world like Trico, serve to create a game that feels surreal. Another interesting thing to note is that according to the same interview from The Guardian, Ueda doesn't really take too much inspiration from the real world or other media when creating environments. It mainly comes from the imagination, which means that realistic environments and architecture isn't necessarily what Ueda was aiming for, but rather an illusion of sorts. Ueda and his team wanted environments and architecture that felt real, but weren't necessarily realistic in their design. This line they skirt between the realistic and fantastic also contribute to the surrealism of the worlds they create. Another aspect of The Last Guardian and Ueda's games in general that is key to why they're so special is the fact that the world they take place in is interconnected. As the player progresses through the game, they have a constant reminder of their physical location just by looking at the places they've been and where they're going. Sometimes they even return to previous areas via different routes, just another aspect that goes a long way to make the game not feel like a series of disconnected challenges. Finally, returning to the details in the world that I referred to earlier, Ueda considers the ability of the player to interpret the narrative and environments in his games as extremely important. It's a way to connect the player to the narrative in a more personal way, because what the player learns and infers about the world is completely determined by how they play and what they pay attention to. Going back to my previous example of that white material that coats the central tower seemingly covering an older piece of architecture, it's details like that Ueda and his team put into their games that allows the player's imagination to run wild, speculate, and ask questions like, what was that structure before it was covered in this white material, and what purpose did it serve at that point in time? Who covered this former structure in this white material, and what purpose does it serve now? And the list of questions goes on even further and further. The point is that the details not only serve to create a believable world, but also to help invest the player in the narrative even more. Team Ico's, Gen Design's, and Sony Japan Studios' work has resulted in games that are impressive and timeless classics for many reasons, but I'd argue that their environments and architecture are a key reason why they're so beloved. They simply instill a sense of curiosity, realism, and mystery that no other games can.